So, hello, thank you for joining us, everyone. And we're going to get started right now. So, we're talking about both habitats and this brand new book, Habitats of the World. And I was very lucky and honored to be asked to illustrate the cover of this book. And so that's one of the reasons we're talking about it today, as well as the fact that I'm lucky to know Iain and have stayed at his lodge, the Tandayapa Bird Lodge in Ecuador, and have gone on several of his tours with several of his awesome guides. In case you haven't met me before, I'm Christine Elder, and I'm a naturalist, environmental educator, visual artist, bird watcher, world traveler. We want to talk a bit about, understanding habitats, why it's important to understand them. Iain's talked about 189 habitats in his book. So we want to make sure that we can understand them, have a greater appreciation and understanding for the biological diversity on this planet. Because a lot of people just think of habitats, they might think of tundra or grasslands, but there's much finer details. So Iain's going to share with us some of those characteristics that define an individual habitat. And then we're going to kind of talk about some of the most threatened habitats, some of the most diverse ones, some of our favorite ones, and where you can see the most habitats in one day. And of course, Iain will talk some more about the book, about the genesis of the book, the process of the team that created it, of authors and photographers.
Can I start by saying that, okay, my name's first, but a lot of the heavy lifting was done by the other three guys.
Right. So I did add the link to the Habitats of the World website that Iain put together here, and you can check that out later. That gives lots of extra resources, and there's going to be more resources in the future too. So anyway, that's the link there. Let's see. Mara says she lives in the pinyon juniper forest. Jackie in an urban habitat. Yeah. Roger in an oak aspen deciduous forest. Right.
Well, Jackie, yeah, urban habitat, actually, although we've only got one urban per realm, per region in the book, we want to really dive into that and actually divide up urban habitats more.
Great.
Depending on where you are, urban habitats can be some of the primary habitats around.
Yeah, right. And I was impressed that that's in the book. And so I did also want to put in the chat box the link to the Tropical Birding Tours website that Iain and his mates run. And they just don't go just to the tropics, they go all over the world, right, Iain?
Oh, yeah, pretty much everywhere.
Yeah, and I put the coupon code for 40% off when you order from Princeton University Press. And there is a hard copy book as well as digital editions. So I first wanted to talk about, just to set the stage, where we are in the world. I am broadcasting from Central Oregon. I live at the kind of nestled between the pine forests, the montane mixed conifer forests just to the west of me, of the volcanic Cascade Range, and nestled to the east is the high desert of mainly juniper forests. So Iain, let's now introduce you and talk about your habitat. So like we said, Iain, of course, is the author of this book we're talking about today, and 3 other books, as well as being the owner of Tropical Birding Tours, the owner of Tandayapa Bird Lodge, and an avid birder and photographer and traveler and all of that stuff. So tell us quickly the habitat you're in today.
Well, I live in what we call tropical rainforest, or lowland tropical rainforest in Australia. So that's got that classification, Australasian lowland tropical rainforest. What's interesting about where I live is we've got savanna nearby, we've got mangroves just down the road, there are loads of other microhabitats around. But our climate here is such that although we live in rainforest, our climate's actually not a rainforest climate. It's right on the edge of a monsoon dry forest climate. So we're living in a habitat that's essentially metastable. and we'll get onto that later. But yeah, it's pretty interesting.
Yeah, cool. And it looks like you're right there in the habitat where you're at there. And I was showing a picture here that you shared. This is a nearby habitat as well.
Mm-hmm. Yep. This is a monsoon. This is a monsoon forest.
Very cool.
So notice there are a few more vines.
Yeah, some
a little bit
epiphyte.
more open space. Yeah, it's a bit messier. Mm-hmm.
Great. Yeah. So just to start off, why should, most people watching today obviously are some sort of nature lover. They might be a bird watcher like us. They might be working in the field as field biologists. Many people in my audience are homeschooling families and educators. So, why should people care about, this habitats and more, knowing more than just the biomes of tundra and grassland and forests?
Well, it's almost it's a way of relating what you know in your area to other parts of the world. So we talk about forest. Well, what is that? It's very, very different around the place. Tundra is pretty similar through most of the northern hemisphere, but I find that, I found that a lot of people just could not relate to habitats or out of their area. So when I was guiding in Sichuan, China, and growing up in Australia, I had no experience with real experience with conifers. We had them, but they're all called pine. The araucarias are called pine. The cypress are called pine. So I was with a group of Americans, and I was telling them where this bird had flown into and called it a pine, and a lady just about ripped my head off. Because she screamed out that it was a spruce and I should have known better. Then taking Americans to Australia, you realize that these guys don't get it when I say we're heading out into a savanna, or we're heading out, we're going into a mallee or a mulga. So I did it in a way, I wanted to create something so people could use it across the board and also understand it. That's why there's a lot of science behind it. There's a general description and the kind of the fluffy part, but all the science behind it. And the other reason is that habitats have always been described by vegetation, which is okay, but with such a botanical focus, we actually miss some of what they're about. And what I mean by that is the oldest vegetation maps were actually incorporating animals into them. The Chinese had them over 3,000 years ago.
Oh, wow.
It was the rhino forests of the south,
Oh.
the elk needle forests of the north, and the bamboo monkey forests of the southwest. So when you look at a definition of a habitat includes animals. This is a place where animals occur. Yet when we're giving descriptions of them, it's always straight botanical. So what I wanted to do was incorporate it into a way where we had a classification where we use the animals that occur in the forest as part of that differentiating feature. And I know this all sounds convoluted, but basically
No, not really.
what it gets to is if two forests look similar, but they have very different animals, we've gone into why that's so, and can we tell them apart? So we've gone trying to describe them because they are actually different. And other times we've had two forests that look different but have essentially the same animal assemblage. We've gone in and thought, okay, what's this about? Why is this the case? And it turns out sometimes broad animal assemblages don't care about the dominant species, the dominant canopy species.
Right, as long as if there are fruit-eating species, they can eat any species of fruit, and I understand that, obviously, yeah. So how did you wrangle in the rest of your team? Were you guys sitting around drinking beer one night and you got them all on board with this?
I put it out there a few times and everyone kind of thought it would be insane. The project was just too broad a project to do. So I had Phil did a lot of the North America stuff, Ken did the Africa stuff, and Charlie did the Indo-Malayan, so south of the Himalayas, India, Southeast Asia, and I did the rest. And we we kind of just went through and got a pattern, got a formula that, okay, this is how we can describe it. So we did Australia first and said, right, this is what we're going to do, and then let's extrapolate that out into the rest of the world and fill it in. But it was only when they saw that it could really come together that we all just went, head down, butt up, and got it done.
Great.
It was thanks to COVID.
Yeah.
We've been working on it for a year, just doing research, and then when COVID hit, we're all going stir crazy, and it's like, okay, let's polish it off. So we got it polished off by, I think, June. So we all got housebound in March and sent the manuscript in June.
Yeah, that's great. The rainbow at the end of the thunderstorm. Yeah.
Let's hope.
So speaking of creating the book, how did you make, again, there's 189 habitats. I didn't count them. The book says that, obviously. And, it seems like it would be such a complex subject. How did you make it so approachable, so visual, in bite-sized pieces that we could actually, enjoy it and learn from it and not get intimidated by the vastness of the subject?
So we had this section where we wrote at the same time, but it was stuff that no one would read. We actually had that as a file, the stuff no one wants to read. So if you put it at the front of a book in an introduction, it's not going to get read. It's stuff like geomorphology, plate tectonics, climate change, but we'll go into that later. And so things that were actually, some of them were quite high level. We're talking, university grade concepts. And we wrote them and then worked out where we could put it. So people are not going to read about the extinction of humans in 80 years in the Sahara. No one's going to pick that up. But if I slot it into the habitat on barren deserts, then they'll read it. If you keep it short enough,
right,
that they see the immediate relevance. So we did that. That made it so there's actually a lot of science in the book.
Right.
It's not just fluff.
Of course.
We use a lot of animal. We use a lot of animal photos as well, again, to make the habitats relevant. So you'll see that although it's a habitats book, you've only got a couple of photos of the forest, and then you've got a bunch of the animals in it. You've got the climate graphs that tell you how exactly.
My favorite. The rainbow bearded thornbill. I was so lucky to see that guy. Yeah. And then we'll show some of the climate graphs and your other silhouettes and things later, but that obviously made it so much more approachable, so visual, So I love that.
The name itself is very dry. We tried to make it as accessible as possible, but people have to pick it up. If they just look at the name of the book, they're probably not going to read it. But if they pick the thing up, they'll see that, look, this is something worth having.
Yeah. And speaking of your photos, who was your photo team? I know our buddy Sam Woods did some pictures. Pablo. Who else was working on the photos?
Ben Canute took a lot of photos.
Yeah.
We had other photos, and then we were going through the last column, and Ben would just look at me and say, look, you can put this photo in, and I know it's your book and it's good for your ego, but I've got better. so many of them at the last cut, it was like, okay, take that photo out, throw Ben's in. Ben and Pablo are the best photographers in the company.
Yeah, you're just so blessed to have such talented staff and so diverse and based all over the world. Yeah. So let's see, where was I going to go with that? So what is your favorite habitat that you visited, or that you like a bucket list one that you haven't visited that you'd love to see?
The two that I want to see the most, there are three actually. There's a pistachio savanna in southern Turkmenistan.
Oh, wow.
There's the dragon blood forest.
Yeah, that's my favorite name for sure.
How can you go past dragon blood semi-desert?
Yeah.
And it's this umbrella-shaped tree that has no understory. It's just barren rock. It's only found on the island of Socotra between Yemen and Somalia. I haven't managed to get there, but Phil Jones going there, I think, next week, which is kind of upsetting. But overall, my favorite habitat is Andean cloud forest.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
To Africans, it's kind of like the Afro-montane rainforest. To Australians, they might notice it up at the top of Mount Hypipne in the African Tablelands, or up at the top of Lamington National Park. It's rainforest, but with many more epiphytes, bromeliads, larger leaf understory. It's just the habitat that I feel most at home in.
Right.
And when I'm in that, and especially in the Andean, just because it's like all of the others but on steroids. The Andean stuff with, when you've got 17 hummingbirds right there at feeders near you.
Right, like these guys.
Like those guys.
So that's probably why you located your Tandayapa Bird Lodge right in the cloud forest. And I was lucky to visit that lodge. Thank you so much. And I sketched these guys all in one morning, just as you promised. You can see 20 species before you finish your coffee. And as most people watching know, that I'm a sketcher and trained as a biological illustrator, but just love being in the field sketching. And it really helps me to see those field marks and remember them with all these new species like the racket-tail and all these saber wings and beautiful species. So yeah, so that's one of my favorites too, as well as the higher elevation Paramo and the Polylepis elfin forests.
Oh, the wet Paramo, like this. Wet Paramo is this. It's like a tundra, but it's on the top of so it's an alpine tundra, but it's just wonderful how spongy and walking over the cushion there. No, that's beautiful. But when I mean by the favorite habitat is that, and the reason Tandayapa is there is that I've been working in Africa, and 27 years old, I guess I was. 28 years old, and went to another lodge which is just near us. I don't know if you went to Bay Vista. It's another lodge in the cloud forest in Ecuador. And I went to visit that place and walked down the hill and entered this forest, and it was just the calmest I'd ever been as an adult. But I think it was probably the first time I'd been calm as an adult. And it was...
You're pretty ADHD like I am.
Oh, big time. Big time. So I went back to Africa, continued working, and got a transfer to Ecuador. Told them I wanted to be transferred to Ecuador. I arrived on the Thursday. On the Saturday, I went out to that exact piece of forest, found the owner, and bought it. It was in my mind. It's like, that's what I want. I want this, thinking that would make me peaceful for the rest of my life. That didn't happen, obviously, but I did build a lodge there.
I don't know. It's almost kind of stressful when you're there because, I was trying to sketch every single bird I saw, and I'd be like, no, wait, there's the toucan, and there's the toucanette, and there's a hummingbird, and there's a tyra, and there's an olingo. Tearing my hair out. Now, so speaking of your favorite habitats, that is one of the world's most diverse habitat. Is there another one you could mention? Is there a place that's more diverse? I mean, usually at the equator, we've got pretty high diversity. What would you say among these 889 habitats would be one of the most diverse in flora and fauna?
Amazonian lowland rainforest, but not... So Amazonian lowland rainforest, but not in the main area of the Amazon. It's actually the western edge, so eastern Ecuador, southern Colombia, and northeastern Peru. That's the that's the highest diversity rainforest for at least for birds and mammals. I don't know about insects. It may actually change with insects, but for birds and mammals, it's that western edge of the Amazon that is the most diverse.
Right. I've been lucky to be in part of that. I was on the upper Amazon on the Madre de Dios River, and that was incredible.
Yeah, that's what I'm talking about. That kind of habitat there, because what you've got is just a little bit of elevation. What happens in the Amazon is it goes down the eastern Andes, and then it has this long, like thousands of kilometers to get to the coast. Right. And there are patches in there that actually there are patches of savanna in the Amazon. There are patches of white sand forest, which is a lowland rainforest with very poor soil. It's on essentially inert sands. So it's a literal rainforest. All the nutrients come from actually the trees themselves.
Right.
So you've got all these habitats where you're not getting as many birds as the terra firma forest.
Right. And another thing I really liked about each of these chapters is you talk about the level of endemism, or species that are found nowhere else. Would that also be one of the places that has the highest endemism, or what would be another habitat?
No.
Oh, okay.
No, it doesn't. That area doesn't have endemism, because endemism, it's kind of a red herring in some ways. That you talk about endemic. Okay, well, if you have an island, you tend to have more endemics.
Right.
Yet animals on islands tend to be Catholic in their habitat choices. They'll live in a variety of different habitats on that one island. Where these large forests, because there's nothing separating them, you tend not to have endemic species, because the definition of an endemic species is one with a distribution less than 50,000 square kilometers.
Okay.
So
right.
that's why
that makes sense.
That's why you may have intense biodiversity or very high biodiversity, but not high endemism. Places where that doubles up, Indonesia, you get high diversity and high endemism. It's kind of crazy there.
Right. Yeah, like one of my other favorite habitats I've visited is in northern Borneo in the Sabah region, and the peat swamp forests, and also the higher elevation montane forests that have all of the carnivorous plants, because I got my master's degree studying pollination biology of a carnivorous plant. So I love those ones, like the Nepenthes pitcher plants. And so, huge level of endemism of those species there in Borneo.
Is it Pouring Hot Springs? Is that the place that has the highest endemism near Kinabalu, Mount Kinabalu?
Yeah, and they also have, of course, the Rafflesia. So, the largest flower in the world. Yeah.
But not the nicest smelling.
Yeah, no. Now, Phyllis asks, what about Cuba? Now, is she asking about endemism, maybe, or biodiversity, or both, maybe?
The Caribbean's pretty depauperate, really. The Caribbean doesn't really have that many species relative to or compared with other areas. Also, Cuba's got rainforest, but also savanna and dry areas. It's actually the Caribbean's an area of the book that we just didn't treat very well. If you're looking at the book and if you're trying to be most critical about the work we did, the Caribbean's not treated well, and Oceania is not treated well. We didn't have time to go into, or didn't have space to go into all of the different islands.
Now, of course, this relates, endemism and biodiversity relates to size of island, it's very directly related. So like Borneo is the third largest island in the world, I believe. And so it's got really high diversity and endemism, as you mentioned, whereas, islands in the Caribbean, much smaller, although things like I've been to Jamaica, and they have 30 endemic bird species. So, it is just kind of a toss up. But in general, the size of the island directly relates to how many species there are. And
the size, the amount of elevation on the island really helps determine how many species. And when I say species, I'm referring to birds, reptiles, and mammals. I'm not talking about insects, mainly because I just don't understand them. Some of our clients are entomologists, and they seem to have a level of understanding that I can only, just barely grasp. But so for birds and mammals, it's if you've got a mountain range, you'll have higher endemism. It's the distance from another major landmass. So if you're close to another major landmass, you'll have more species. So you'll have higher
that whole island biodiversity theory. Size and distance of islands from other islands. Well, so speaking of elevation, wherever you have a elevation gradient, you're going to have a lot of diversity in a smaller space. And so that was one of my next questions is, where would you suggest, if people could go have a bucket list to go anywhere in the world, and where could they see the most habitat types in like one day or a couple days?
In a couple of days. Southernmost Ecuador. Southern Ecuador gives you a lot, because there in southern Ecuador you've got rainforest, desert, savanna, paramo, all within a few hours drive of each other, and that's because where elsewhere you've got the Andes is primarily north-south with two cordilleras, so rainforest on either side, Andean Valley in between, which has thorn scrub and desert type terrains. In southern Ecuador, the mountain ranges also go east-west, so you're cruising around a hill and you are in rainforest. And you take a turn, and then you're doing around, and the next thing you are in desert. It is insane how fast that changes. So that's an area that I've been really, really impressed with. Another is the East African highlands. So around Ushuaia, you can cruise down the edge of a volcano. You're in montane forest, then you're in savanna, then you're in plains, tropical grasslands, desert, all in this tiny area.
Right.
Those kind of things really give me a buzz.
Just like here, I was mentioning, I'm from this area where we've got the 10,000 foot volcanic Cascade Mountain range. And so there's not only a huge elevation gradient, but then the rain shadow too. So a big gradient in precipitation, and then temperature too as you go east. So I was looking at your book, studying, and I live within even not even a day, maybe a couple hours drive of 9 different habitats. And so that's why we have such great species diversity within that. Like, even if you just take one group of organisms like the woodpeckers, we have half of the North America's woodpeckers, 12 species in this area, partly because of those gradients of temperature and elevation and that kind of thing.
Well, that's another thing, Christine, if I could just say that people look at vegetation maps and they look at one thing. They look at the map and it says one thing. So in Northwest Oregon, you're looking at, it's going to be temperate rainforest on most of the maps. Right. But if you treat a habitat like a species, and that's why it's called the field guide to habitats, because I've treated it like a species, as in it's got its own distribution map. So any one location can have not just multiple habitats, it can have multiple biomes. So some people only have 6 biomes, I've got 8 biomes in the world, they're divided up, but you can have 4 of them in the one location. So you've got the overriding factor of latitude, and then you've got elevation, and then you throw in rainfall on top of it, and rain shadows. So when you put when you add in temperature and effective rainfall, you then open it up to you open it up to, like you say, your 6 habitats in the one tiny area. And I think that's what I wanted to get people to actually use it like that. Think, okay, I'm not just going to go to Eastern Australia. I'm not just going to go to the wet tropics in Cairns. I'm going to go to this area and have seven habitats right there, and I'm going to want to visit them, and I'm going to want to protect them. So
great. So a couple of examples. Yeah. So, folks in the chat box, go ahead and ask questions. Like Charlotte says, she understands Cuba has endemic snails, among other delights. Mm-hmm. Yeah, there's that beautiful snail with all the multicolored stripes in it. I remember seeing a lot of colorful snails in the Caribbean, in fact, on other islands as well. And yeah, each island might have its own endemic. So let's see, where were we? We were talking about, favorite habitats. Of course, we've been talking kind of a lot about the neotropics and the rainforests. And we know in general, rainforests are being depleted very quickly from logging and slash and burn agriculture. But on a global scale, what would you say are a couple of the world's most threatened habitats, and maybe what those threats are?
I'm going to talk about terrestrial habitats because I don't know enough about wetlands, okay?
Great, okay.
But Fair I know, enough. So I don't want to speak to what I don't know. But I would say Paramo is probably the most most endangered habitat, or the forests on the edge of Paramo, because it's very limited. So Paramo, again, is this Arctic tundra, but it occurs in the tropics. And it's at a very limited elevational range, and also a limited distribution. So that's one that I've been looking at the Köppen climate predictions. So that's one that I'm worried about. So you've got some habitats that are endangered because of clearing, some that are endangered because of climate. One that's endangered because of both of them is Polylepis. Polylepis is this kind of it's a tree at the very edge of the tree line, and it's used by a lot of Andean communities for firewood, and at the same time, it grows extremely slowly. And with the way the temperatures are changing, it's unlikely that you'll be getting much regeneration there. Northern tundra, I've seen the boggy tundras change in the 20 years I've been going up to Barrow in
fantastic place. King eiders. Oh, love them.
I know. But so when we started going up, it was about the 8th of June was when you've got the ocean still completely frozen. So you've got this crazy ice cliffs at the coast. And what you're trying to do when you're birding there is you're waiting for these tens, if not hundreds of thousands of birds heading north. They see the frozen ocean and they drop, because the very top couple of inches of snow on the tundra has melted, creating these kind of very shallow temporal lakes. Now that used to be about the 5th of June was the ideal time to land. Now it's on about the 10th of June, we're finding, and we'll probably even change it to the 12th of June. And it may not seem like much, but it's a lot for the birds that are heading up there. It's a lot for the birds that head up there, and what was just open tundra with a little bit of marsh is now dried out tundra, and now the lakes are deeper. So that's another one that I think's in a bit of trouble.
Yeah, so climate change is affecting those northern species because they can't go any higher in latitude, and it's affecting the Paramo Polylepis forest because they can't go any higher in altitude.
Europe's a great example of this, and that's actually in the book. There's a section about why the vegetation is depauperate in Europe compared to East Asia. The trees look very similar, forests look similar, but they're very different. And what it is the forests in eastern United States and in Eastern Asia with variable climate with ice age, they go south, they move north, but in Europe, you've got these east-west mountains that stop that happening quickly. So if the temperatures are rising at a certain speed, so that's one type of vegetation is dying, yet the other vegetation is not moving fast enough, it's not advancing at that speed, then you're going to have this dead zone. So what happens when the tundra dies, but the conifer forests haven't moved north fast enough? That's the kind of thing I'm worried about. Those habitats that can't adapt quickly enough.
Right. Yeah, and I've seen lots of examples of habitats threatened, like by oil palm plantations, right?
Yeah, your peat forests in
coffee
Borneo.
plantations.
Those peat forests in Borneo that you're talking about.
Yeah. Yeah, it's disheartening to fly over places like that and just see, miles and miles of monocultures of one crop, and just not only oil palm, but of course, pineapples and other palms, and all those things that we all eat. We all use
like when you're in the Kinabantan, I take it you went up to the Kinabantan. You're cruising there, and you've got proboscis monkeys, and
and the storm stork and the hornbills, and
it all feels idyllic, right? And then you take a peek and you realize that there's only kind of 100 yards of forest. And it's a few hundred miles of plantation. We have that very same issue here. When I fly from Portland to Seattle, and there's clear cuts in our montane mixed conifer forests as far as the eye can see, except within 100 yards of a main road. So same thing. You think you're in the wilderness, and you just have to peek over and see you're not. Let's see. I have a couple questions. Susanna asks, there are terrain maps, but are there habitat maps? Not quite sure what she means by that. If Susanna, can you elaborate on that?
And Milana, who was one of my longest students, has probably taken about 50 of my online sketching classes. She says, what habitats are in Iowa? I'm not sure how well you know the United States, since you're all the way in Australia.
No. You've got Iowa is tall grass prairie, supposedly.
Right.
You've got what's left of it. I think most of Iowa's been the prairies have been removed, wasn't it? At one point, it got down to a critical stage where it was predominantly in cemeteries. There are some really cool pasture regeneration projects going on, prairie regeneration projects going on though. But Iowa, and that's you've got some of the cedar savannas head up that way. There's a string of cedar savannas. They get up into Iowa, and you've got a little bit of the deciduous forest, but it's essentially should be a prairie.
Right.
What's really interesting is one of my clients was working in Virginia on prairies, and he was telling me that his job was to find endangered habitats in Virginia. That was his job, was to buy them. And he was going through the fire regime, and this idea that we used to say that the squirrel could go from Manhattan all the way across to the Mississippi is just not true. At least one third of Virginia was savanna, savanna and prairie when colonialism occurred. Yeah.
Right. And of course, non-natives can really affect habitats, like on the East Coast, the non-native, the chestnut blight wiped out that whole habitat, and non-native, feral animals on islands, of course, have wreaked havoc on the Galapagos and lots of other places in the world. And so, we've got comments about palm oil. Yeah, that's a tough issue. They've snuck palm oil into just about every product you can think of on the market. It's very hard to avoid it, unfortunately. And Jacqueline says, your greatest power is your daily food choices. That's right. Okay, and so getting less we've gotten all serious about threatened habitats. I know there
Yeah.
must be some habitats in the world that are improving. Would you say any of those based on your experience?
Yep. So a lot of forest in the near tropics, certainly in places like Costa Rica and Ecuador, not counting the Amazon, okay? But a lot of places, forests become much more valuable than land. So when I went and bought my first piece of rainforest in Ecuador, it was attached to a bit of pasture, and the forest at the time had no value. Okay, the forest had zero value. So when I went to try and buy the land, I actually was buying the 5 acres that were right there on that one property of pasture, and because you just cut the rest down. It's not worth anything until you cut it down.
Right.
That same valley now, pasture is worth very little, and forest is very expensive. People see all through Central America, people are seeing that forest has value. It's got more value as forest than it does as pasture.
And both simply from tourism as well as just the biodiversity services, the ecosystem services it provides, like holding the soil so there won't be floods.
There is that. There's carbon capture, though sometimes they cheat with carbon capture and put in put in an introduced species or a eucalypt forest, which doesn't really do much more than the pasture did. But another area that's really kind of fascinating is the way photography and ecotourism has changed the dynamics in Southeast Asia. So when I first went to Thailand, I went to Thailand in 1989, and the birds were skittish. They were skittish, and it was not particularly safe to walk in some forests because of bird poachers. You go there now, and it's a very different forest. The birding is great. The birds are much more confiding. They've stopped hunting, essentially. They've just stopped it, and they're regenerating. And the people who used to be hunters are now earning money taking predominantly East Asian clients to photograph animals. This is not a case of like Westerners coming in and dropping money and saving the day. This is the local market getting so enthusiastic about nature photography that they come along and drop the cash and convince their own people to protect what's left. So southern China now has over 100 locations where you can go photographing birds at different private reserves in Yunnan province and southern Sichuan.
Great. Yeah, that was going to be one of my next questions, is how can we help preserve habitats? And of course, one of them is with our tourist dollars and also with our food choices. What other kind of main categories would you say that the general person like watching today could things to do to help preserve habitats?
That's a really loaded question.
Yeah, it just depends on which habitat you're talking about.
So I've had numerous arguments about whether tourism's bad or not.
Right.
And whether the
So beyond tourism, what other things?
The carbon footprint. Well, what we can say is now in COVID has told people, just before COVID, there were articles coming out about how bad ecotourisms were. We are killing the animals with our love. Well, you know what? Right. You have COVID, you stop the tourism, and you're not killing the animals with your love.
The poachers come in. Yeah.
People are taking them out. And we were looking at a way, I did the numbers on what ecotourism, the carbon footprint, and I looked at it, and it was just a flight from DC to South Africa I've got to get the numbers right, but it was like 1.5 tons of carbon put in. And then I looked at, okay, well, what's the cost of offsetting that? And it was pathetic. The cost of offsetting it was like $45, I think was what we calculated. So we decided, okay, well, let's not offset anymore. Let's triple it. If we create if we create carbon that will cost $50 to offset, then let's put 150 back in. But you've got to keep people going to these places, because if they're not going to them, they will not be preserved. There's just not. We live in these, you live in the States, and now I live in Australia, where we think, well, okay, well, we pay our taxes, the government will look after it. It's just not the case around most of the world. The governments in most of the countries are absolutely hopeless at protecting forest. Northwest Ecuador is protected through foundations, through foundations like
Yoko
Foundation,
Toko, yes,
Mindo Cloud Forest Foundation,
right,
which is all creating corridors between reserves of regenerated lands, and they're using that. So carbon offsetting to link reserves. It's all private.
Right.
So
I was lucky to visit all of those locations, and they're amazing, from the sword-billed hummingbird to the ocellated tapaculo and the ant pittas and everybody.
So you've been to Milky, right? Did you go down to Milky? Okay, that place, when we first saw Milky, that was pasture, and it was pasture, and there was a block of forest behind it, and the way that was protected was I had some metallic starlings right beside us. Very cool.
Oh, pretty.
So we were down there, and I had this wealthy client, and he was looking at the bird through the scope, and right then I just dropped the message to him. I said, this bird's not protected at all, and this land is for sale. And his response was, how much? And it was just straight. I said, look, just straight off the bat, $11,000. We can get this piece. And that was done. In that moment, that went in, and we got other money. We created a foundation, which now I don't have anything to do with. But they do this amazing work. And it's all through private donations rather than government. It's through private philanthropy and tourism.
Yeah, I got some great views of the club-winged manakin there, and the Guayaquil woodpecker.
Well, those birds, the club-winged manakin, that is on what was pasture. In 2005, 2006, that was actual cow pasture. That's all regenerated. Yeah. The main trails you do there are all in regenerated land.
And you just give nature half a chance, and it'll spring back.
Yeah, it really does. It really does. Yeah. Whether you change the fire regime in some of the savannas, you change the fire regime, or you do some active regeneration, some genuine carbon sequestration, but real carbon sequestration, not people just planting balsa forests or eucalypt forests and claiming that it's doing the right thing. Like, real stuff can have a huge impact. That's a lot of the stuff I'm getting into now. Yeah.
Okay, great. So I want to move on. We did talk about some of the characteristics of habitats, diverse habitats, favorite habitats, threatened ones, improving ones, how to preserve some. So, let's go on to some eye candy. I know we have a few images here. And while I'm getting that up, again, anybody in the chat box, ask us any questions. That would be awesome, because that's what we're here for. So let me get this. That's right. Got so many buttons here. Click to close. Right. So we just got some slides here. They're not really in order, but I've got some, we started with some interesting habitat photos that you might say something about. And then I have some of the wildlife pictures you shared, and then ending with some of those graphs and silhouettes, so we can kind of understand more specifics. But we got some eye candy here for us. So just kind of riff on some of these photos, whatever you wanted to say about them. We already mentioned this is your own home habitat in northeastern Australia.
This is monsoon rainforest. So it's a rainforest with a deciduous element, and it's more open than the full tropical rainforest.
And I noticed you started the book with Australia, maybe because you're from there.
It is, yeah. Well, yeah. Well, I was from Australia, but I was living in the US when I wrote the book.
Right,
Yeah,
right.
maybe I was just nostalgic.
Yeah, that's right. Okay. And then moving on.
Okay, so this is a moist, what we call moist mixed savanna. So it's dominated. If you see there, you've got a couple of acacia trees to the
Yeah,
right of the elephants. You've got the baobabs.
that's huge. Those baobabs are amazing.
Yeah. So the definition of a savanna is one with a grass component understory rather than so it's a woodland with a grass understory rather than a shrub understory. And we kind of use the word savanna for grasslands as well. We're actually grasslands as such are not savannas. But
There's
that's just
no
an
tree.
used the word. This
Right.
this is a savanna. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, this is I love this stuff. This is a tropical deciduous forest. And this is one of the problems with the way biomes and habitats were classified is that it's just so Euro and Northern Hemisphere centric that this was regarded, mapped in or as a deciduous forest. It is deciduous, but it's not a temperature forest. This is deciduous because of rainfall.
It kind of looks like the when I visited the Galapagos Islands and all of those incense trees.
Yep.
They didn't have any of their leaves this time of year.
Yep. And in the wet season, this will thicken up and it'll actually look like a rainforest.
Wow.
Much the same way that when you're in the southern, like say, especially that Tennessee area, when in the summer those forests feel like rainforest. You know, they really do. This is the same. This will thicken right up in the wet season. But notice it's, even though it's in the dry season, you've got bromeliads all through.
Yeah, a lot of epiphytes on there. Yeah. Carol says we need to add some marine habitats into the next edition. Yeah, or a whole new book on aquatic habitats.
I wanted to do a wetland habitats of the world and an anthropogenic habitats of the world as well. And there just wasn't, they didn't think that it would work. But what we are working on is another edition, but specifically a much more detailed. So North America, and if we do the North America one, it will have all of the wetlands. Will have not as many, but just as many. We're looking at we're up around 35 different habitats for wetland and pelagic habitats for North America.
Right.
Yeah,
I love
I agree completely.
Vernal pool habitat.
I was given 560 pages and I was trying to squeeze it. Can you give me 600? Can you give me 570? And it was not going to happen.
I know how that
so yes,
goes.
you're right. We need the same kind of book on wetlands, treated the same way. And actually, I don't know if you see, I've got this crazy image in my head of a way you can represent water fluctuations in a similar thing to climate, superimposed on silhouettes. That'll be great. Anyway, this is Paramo.
Yeah.
What I was telling you about.
Wetlands in it.
I mean, when I take people to these habitats, Paramo, it feels like I've been in places in Colorado that have a feel like this. What's it? Is it Lovekin Pass?
Yeah.
In Colorado has a similar feel, and
right.
There are places in the Tibetan Plateau that have a similar feel, and northern Scotland. It's an interesting kind of environment.
Yeah, and you can't really tell from this picture, but when you're there and you put your hand on the ground and you're feeling all the little miniature bonsai plants, you feel like a giant because they're so tiny compared to what you're used to, kind of like in the Arctic tundra,
Yeah, it is.
I was so impressed with in Peru, I think Abramalaga Pass,
Mm-hmm.
isn't that this habitat type?
Yep.
Yeah, and going into the Polylepis forest too.
Yeah.
Oh, this is a picture of mine, favorite habitat of mine in Central California. This chaparral habitat. This is in Pinnacles National Park, where they've reintroduced the California condors, and it's just really diverse and fragrant. I really love it. Have you been to California much? It's got a lot of habitats because of its latitude and altitude variation.
I have not as much as you'd expect. I did a little bit around Monterey, and I've gone and done the San Diego area a bit out to Barriga, but no, I'd like to spend more time there.
Yeah, this is inland from Monterey. Yeah.
See, this habitat here, this photo could be, I mean, with the kind of, if you took out the conifers in the back, this could be the same as the Karoo just out of Cape Town in South Africa. It's the same kind of thing as you'd find around Tarifa in southern Spain. It is really interesting how some of these habitats look very similar. And that's one of the things I wanted to do, is like relate it. So everyone, the way I describe a habitat, when I describe chaparral, I describe it as the equivalent of the maque or garrigas in Spain.
Right. Here's a picture from Corsica, I think, and I love
exactly the same thing.
The smell was my most favorite part. All the diversity of those shrubs blooming, and they were all just really pungent, just like California coastal chaparral. I loved it.
And essentially identical climate graphs.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. So this is another kind of paramo.
Right.
And this, I don't know this photo, but is this Venezuela or Eastern Colombia?
It's Colombia. Yeah.
I haven't been to this place.
What are the name? I forget the name of those.
Frajeles.
They're amazing.
Frajeles? Yeah.
So cool. Okay.
Yeah, they're very, very cool.
This is a favorite photo from the dipterocarp forests in Southeast Asia. And all of these trees have these giant buttresses to help hold them up, just like in cathedrals in Europe, the flying buttresses, right?
Mm-hmm.
And yeah.
So this kind of forest, if you were to look at it, see that there's more understory. It's a little bit thicker than you'd be if you were in an Amazonian lowland rainforest. This kind of forest is regarded as a semi-evergreen. So it's a rainforest, but it does have a deciduous component. The dipterocarps. So that's what kind of sets it apart. They're great. They're a lot of fun. Was this Kaoyai or?
Oh, I don't remember, but I do remember the Bornean gibbons and how loud they were.
Oh, okay, this was in Borneo. Sorry, yeah.
And I was blessed to be bitten by a tiger leech, which was fun. Anyway, moving on.
I convinced a client that once there that we had to stick a tiger leech on him in Danam Valley and time how long it sucked for. And this guy, I couldn't believe that he was paying me to be his guide, but he agreed to do it. 45 minutes, and it dropped off that big, real juicy lot of blood.
Now let's see. I think this is one of mine, the Arctic tundra, where I love seeing things like musk oxen, and this is the Polylepis forest with those very interesting trunks that have that bark that looks like it's kind of peeling off, almost like a madrone tree or eucalyptus tree.
And like southern, almost like a southern island, South Island, New Zealand kind of forest. And these are also tend to be windswept. So
crumholes.
Exactly. So when you're in one of these Polylepis forests, it feels as almost you're on a coastal forest in either down in Chile or up on the Olympic Peninsula.
Right. Oh, let's see. Oh, that's another one from Africa. So I guess that would be the same the same savanna habitat we saw earlier with the elephants.
Yeah, this is right on the edge. So this is merging between moist mixed savanna and grassland.
A little drier, yes, a little bit more open.
You're getting some component of whether the birds are predominantly using the trees or the animals are predominantly browsing on trees, and then vast areas where there'd be species in there that don't use trees at all.
The browsers.
So this is kind of on that boundary.
Yeah.
Yep.
Okay, now a few wildlife pictures you shared and I shared. Let's see. This is a
rainbow pitter from northern Australia. This is around. This occurs in the monsoon forest around Darwin.
Amazing
Right, yeah.
iridescent blue.
Yeah, to think that this is 5 minutes walk from the center of Darwin is kind of insane. Lilac-breasted roller. This is
now we're in Africa.
Yeah, this is probably the most photographed bird in East Africa and Southern Africa.
Amazing action shot there.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and it's got those interesting leaves. You know, one of the sidebars I really enjoyed in the book was about the leaf shapes, and that if you were, dropped blindfolded someplace into any part of the world, you could just look at the type of leaves and get an idea of where you were, right? Whether they were, sclerophyllus. How would we?
Scleriferous.
Or if they were, with the cloud forest with the evergreen drip tips.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
And this handsome fella.
This photo, I put this in. This is an endemic. This is a bird that's found in Mallee, in Australia, and it's not, it's not the most glamorous bird, but it's one of those things where if you're just wandering around and you look at a distribution map of a bird, you'd think that you'd be able to find this if you went wandering in central Victoria or southwestern New South Wales. But unless you're in the specific habitat, you're just not going to get it. And this is a yellow-plumed honeyeater, and it's from Mallee. And Mallee and Mulga kind of appear the same to people who are not really into it. But just take a quick look at the difference, and you'll find that you've got these very you've got the whole bird assemblage changes dramatically with these habitats that are side by side. And
this is a type of eucalyptus, isn't it?
It's a kind of eucalypt, yep. Mallees are predominantly, I think there are 6 main species in southwestern Australia, 6 main species of mallee down there.
Yeah, and this is another species that's very pungent with the leaves. And a lot of those kind of species are adapted to fire. We have a lot of fires, of course, in Australia, and we've had devastating fires here in the North America, but, they are part of the habitat, and many of the species are adapted to it to some extent, especially the plants.
Most of the stuff in Australia. There's some new work coming out that's showing that vast areas of Australia were managed by Aboriginals using fire, but not just wandering around not knowing what they were doing, but really strategically managed by fire when people came to Australia. So the white guys came to Australia, saw this land, thought, wow, this is all cool, let's take it over and start farming it, and then wondered why it thickened up into a scrub that they couldn't really use.
Right. One of my favorites.
Yeah, this is booted racket-tail. This is from Tandayapa.
I love their little boots.
Yeah, they're very, very cool.
They're very adorable. Cool. And I got a little one here. I did a few pictures of those, but here's my quick 1-minute sketch of the booted racket-tail.
Yeah. Well, when my kids were 2 and 3 years old, we went out to the lodge one time, and I came out, and both of the kids were holding the tails.
Oh gosh!
They'd both walked up because the birds were so confiding that they were both taking the tails, and it's like, yeah, guys, you really can't do that.
Right. Yeah. And like we were saying, the hummingbird diversity on the equator is just amazing. Out of the 330 species or something of hummingbirds in the Americas, you can see about 100 of them near the equator, right?
Mm. Yeah, and there's a very specific reason why the they're so common there, because what's happening is you've got this huge elevation range. So you're going from, what are we at? We're at about 5,000 feet to just over 9,000 feet in an incredibly short area, less than a mile. And the lodges plunked at 6,000 feet, 1,600 meters for metric users. And the birds are actually, it's so steep that we think the birds are all there, but it's not. These cloud forests have lineations of different elevation zones that we don't notice. But the birds are actually mixing because they're all from different areas. So, you'll have birds that are predominantly much higher and much lower, and they just come in to get a fix at the hummingbird feeders.
Yeah, they're following the
flowers. That's why we see
feeders.
Yep. Yeah, that's why we're seeing so many of them.
Yeah, and all during the pandemic, you and all the other lodges had to keep feeding those hummingbirds, whether they were guests or not, else they disappear.
Yeah, that's true.
I couldn't imagine how many pounds of sugar you go through every day filling those feeders.
What's the most we went through? We went through a 50 kilo bag once in 2 weeks.
Yeah, I used to help fill those feeders when I was visiting your lodge, and it takes a while.
Yeah. You got to keep going back.
Now here, if I leave my feeder out overnight, it gets emptied by the deer. I've watched them drink the hummingbird nectar, steal it from the hummers.
No, ours are taken by bats.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. We don't have those here.
But
now there's that handsome cock of the rock.
Yeah, I like that guy.
Beautiful.
Yeah, so this is a Caatinga. This is a family of birds that's only found in South America, or in the near tropics, so Central and South America.
Yeah, I love those gray tertials, and I remember seeing the nest at your lodge. So your lodge is a great place for seeing those guys too. Oh, this is mine. So I know earlier you had mentioned Madagascar. We didn't really talk about in terms of habitats that are endangered in the world, but of course, much of Madagascar is with these incredible endemism of not only lemurs, but of course, chameleons as well, like this panther chameleon.
Yeah. Well, what's interesting about Madagascar is you've got the deciduous forests in the northwest. You've got the remaining rainforests along the eastern coast, and in the south you've got these spiny deserts, which are another crazy habitat with octopus trees.
Octopus trees.
Oh yeah, octopus trees. So you feel as though you're in a Dr. Seuss book, but the deciduous forests are in a little bit of trouble. The spiny forests are being cut for charcoal. The rainforests are not being cut so much anymore. They've done a pretty good job of stopping that.
Oh, good.
Because so the Madagascans are doing okay on that. Yet the problem there now is poaching.
Right.
Extreme levels of poaching, and not for the local. It's not for the local market. It's to be shipped off to East Asia.
Yeah. Jacqueline says she loves those gorgeous colors. Yes, Jacqueline, you may have joined me for one of my workshops. I did a nature sketching workshop on chameleons, I think last year. Okay, what else do we have here? Oh, this is Sam's photograph of the musk oxen in the Arctic tundra. So cute. He looks much more light-footed than you think he would be.
They're so gorgeous. So this was up in Nome?
I don't know. This is Sam Wood's photo he gave me.
Okay. No, that was in Nome.
Yeah.
So muskox were an animal that almost went extinct. They were really close to extinction, and now the numbers seem to be okay. Again, we don't know what's going to happen with climate change, but at least it's no longer under any hunting pressure.
Yeah. Okay, what else? Oh, yeah. Similar kind of critter, but a different kind of habitat. Let's see. Let's keep moving on here. Some owls in the conifer forest. We're kind of running out of time. Oh, we haven't talked much about Antarctica.
No, Antarctica. So this is Antarctic tundra. King penguins on Antarctic tundra. I don't know the photo, but it looks like South Georgia. In fact, it is South Georgia, or it could be Macquarie Island. But yeah, that's in the Antarctic. You've got these weird pelagic habitats as well. The ice sheets are almost like they deserve their own habitat description.
Yeah.
But yeah, this subantarctic tundra and Antarctic tundra goes up from the Falklands through South Georgia, Macquarie Island, and there's a little tiny tip of it on the Antarctic Peninsula. You can get little pieces of tundra on the Antarctic Peninsula.
And like you'd mentioned with the Arctic tundra, these high latitude areas are getting affected by climate change much more rapidly.
Much more rapidly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, let's move on to our final section, your specific ways of looking at habitats. In general, we've probably all grew up in grade school learning about these major divisions of the world. And, and then maybe you learned about some of the biomes. And most people watching today, of course, know if they live in a tundra or savanna or conifer forest or deciduous forest. But so that was already set for you. But then, researching the book and such, you were starting to, delve deeper and making all these interesting graphs. So we could just share a few of these. You could riff on whatever you want to say about like these precipitation and
okay. Well, if you drop, so there was a way of mapping and a concept created in the 60s about plotting temperature versus precipitation and determining what that does to the plant. So over 100 millimeters of rain, so that's 4 inches a month, you've got surplus water, always surplus water. Okay. Generally most of the world, we sit in this light blue area. And what this orange shows is when you plot in Celsius, it doesn't work in, you can't do it in Fahrenheit. When you plot Celsius versus precipitation on this graph, so 20 millimeters of precipitation equals 10 degrees of Celsius. When you plot those, where the temperature line goes above the precipitation line, you have plants in drought stress. And when plants have drought stress, that's what determines whether you have a evergreen forest or a monsoon forest or a savanna. And the reason I do this is Cooktown, what I said earlier, this is in northeast Queensland. So we are in what we say is a rainforest, yet this area of drought, we're dealing with 4 months of plant stress here. If our climate changes and we get a little bit drier, we start to hit that 5-month period of drought, that cannot sustain rainforest. So even though we always talk about up here, Daintree Forest, the oldest wet tropics, the oldest rainforest in the world, except not continuous. It almost got wiped out a few times.
Oh, wow.
And it had a little tiny refugia that kept it going. And it would not take much drying of northeast Queensland for the rainforest here to go. And in fact, in Iron Range in Cape York, they've actually had a situation where in 2019 they had a cyclone. Cyclone came, knocked down a bunch of trees. Then they had a bushfire. And so now the rainforest is not used to bushfire. What's happened now is with the climate, we don't know whether that'll revert to rainforest. That may actually some of that may go to savanna, some of that may go to monsoon forest.
Permanently changed. Yeah.
It is really interesting how that can happen. So nothing's a given here. But using this climate graph where you see orange is plant stress, light blue is normal, dark blue is serious water surplus, you can then look at habitats around the world. So I don't know if you've got any more that I can.
Let me see what we have here. We just have a kind of a smorgasbord. I really love these silhouettes in the book that let you know how big the vegetation is compared to you. Like when we were looking at those elfin polylepis forest pictures, you couldn't really tell just how bonsai they were. And so these kind of images are really cool. I love these.
Yeah, so we did every habitat in the world with the same image, with the same the same person in there.
Right.
And so this is an Australian coastal heathland, and it works. It's a way of people seeing quickly the kind of feel of it, because what I find frustrating is that often photographs don't show you what it's like to be in a forest. You just don't get it.
Yeah, it's just all green. It just kind of
it's all green. It's broadleaf.
You can't see the forest for the trees, as they say.
Yeah, exactly. So what I've done is I've got silhouettes, and this came from actually a journaling conference I went to, where I saw this lady, Abby, I can't remember her name, Abby someone. She's talking about southern New Zealand, and I've been in that forest, and the way she painted it was so much better than any photograph that I'd been in. It actually it made me feel like I was back in there. So that's why I've tried to do this, to give a feel of the forest through silhouettes of each kind of habitat.
Okay, let's see, what do we have next? Oh, here's another one. I like this one.
Oh yeah, here we are with not just 4 habitats. We've got 4 biomes, all in the same area, and that's why I've tried to use this.
Right, so backing up more and seeing, yeah.
So you've got, and all it is it's a change of. Sometimes it's a change of wind direction, or so the difference between the spinifex and the savanna is savanna's got deeper soils, and its soils, spinifex is primarily on the rocks. They're both fire dominant. You go down the monsoon forest, it's protected from desiccating winds. The soil's a bit thicker, you'll get rainforest. Then you move over to mangroves, and you've got inundation with saline waters.
Right, that's interesting. We haven't mentioned soils yet, and of course the geology that is underlies them and how important that is. Like in California, where I grew up, our state mineral is serpentine, and it's very toxic. But certain plants, like the carnivorous plant I studied for my master's degree, Darlingtonia, is found almost exclusively on serpentine seeps. And it kind of makes up for that by being carnivorous and not taking its nutrients from the soil. But yeah, that's another thing to add on. What determines a habitat is not only latitude, longitude, and precipitation and temperature, but also the basic rocks underneath.
Well, there's a sidebar in the book that talks about that in a way, and again, this is at a level that we were doing in my postgrad work, where it was about solutions of iron, aluminium, and silica moving through the tropical environment. But that no one's going to read that. No one cares about that. However, when you put it into context and you say, okay, this is why we have desertification. If this comes through, if this thing is seeped, these elements are in colloidal fashion, and they're sitting there in the soil, and you clear that topsoil, they will bake. And then you have this hard pan, and that's one of the causes of desertification. So you can actually get more chance of desertification in areas that are on the edge of semi-humid environments than you have in true deserts. It's a crazy mix of situations that causes this desiccation and just destruction of landscape. But people wouldn't normally look at that. Oh, yeah. So this is where I've tried to combine it all together. So if you look through at the top, it's desert. So this is going from Mauritania in Western Africa, going down through Senegal, and essentially into the Guinean rainforests. And you'll see that the temperature is always above. You've got plant stress in the grasslands. You see that short little period of enough enough water to create a habitat or grassland habitat. Savanna, if we move over to this Bamako, Mali, up onto the top right, that's yeah. So that's where you start getting the full-on savanna, the savanna habitats, and there, once you're in northern Ghana, fire then takes over. So you've got this area where you've got enough water most of the year, You've got some periods of drought. So generally you'll get some kind of semi-evergreen forest or a woodland. You introduce fire into that equation, and that determines whether you have a woodland or a savanna. So that's really the difference between them, whether you're having a savanna or a forest.
Let's see what else here. Oh, that's another side view. Yeah, you really get I just love these silhouettes. How did you create these silhouettes, the black silhouettes of the plants?
I went around and photographed a bunch of different distinctive trees against a plain background. Then I put them into Photoshop.
Wow.
Hit the contrast multiple times, cut them out, turn them to a JPNG.
Oh wow.
Then into Illustrator. But anyway, I ended up putting them into Illustrator, and most of the work was actually cutting leaves and saying, yeah, okay, if I look at this tree and change the way the branches bend and the leaf shape slightly, I've got a different tree. So I can use the same. So I was using photographs predominantly taken in South America and Africa, and creating the habitats for the rest of the world out of them.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, it just looks so realistic. I just love the diversity of these plants here.
Mm-hmm.
Let's see. That's just another one. Anything about this you want to say?
Yeah. Okay. So why I've got this in here is this is showing you that habitats don't just it's not. Some people look at it as a mosaic. Other people look at it as a melange. But really, this is where you've got two environments merging, but at different levels. So on the one hand, your canopy is merging between rainforest and a sclerophyll woodland. Oh, I'm pointing at that, sorry. At the sclerophyll woodland at one area, okay? On the canopy.
And the
Yeah, but look down below. Look at the floor. The floor, the rainforest assemblage is the same. So you can have an assemblage, you can have a ground level assemblage of animals moving and transitioning at a different rate than the canopy. So when you're wandering along, and this is actually a road in Lamington National Park, it's called Duck Creek Road. When you're walking along, if you're only looking at the ground, okay, you will think you're in rainforest.
Uh-huh.
And then you look up and suddenly it's like, oh, the canopy's completely eucalypt. So I've got rainforest ground with things like red-necked pademelon, and then I look up and I've got koalas in the canopy, which are you don't get koalas in rainforest. And I've done this more and more. We've looked at this in many parts of the world now. So I've got a whole bunch of these examples for other areas. Habitats merging into each other at different levels within the forest.
Yeah. Oh, I'd love to see that paradise riflebird. Just hearing him is amazing.
Hang on, but aren't we planning a trip together?
Yes, we
okay,
are.
So it's sorted. We will.
Okay. Oh, yeah. I just put this one in because that is one of my favorite places. That's where we had such a high diversity of the Nepenthes pitcher plants.
Mm-hmm.
And let's see. Oh, yeah. This is interesting way to look at.
I kind of made this up as well. And I wasn't sure. I didn't make it. I wasn't sure whether this would ever work when I was trying to visualize. I was trying to visualize how you can relate between a habitat that is water dependent versus, or predominantly water dependent, versus a habitat that is predominantly temperature dependent. So some of these things, look at the rainforest. Once you're above 1600 millimeters, again, what is that? 1600 millimeters a year. That's about 5 inches a month. Okay. Once you're over 5 inches a month, it's rainforest.
Right.
Depending on what temperature you're on, it's temperate rainforest. So your temperate rainforest in North America, in the northern hemispheres are things like your stuff on the Olympic Peninsula. So coniferous, but temperate rainforest. Yep. You get the same kind of thing, little patches of it over in Kamchatka. But in the southern hemisphere, the temperate rainforests are beach forests of southern New Zealand, It is the temperate temperate rainforests of southern Australia, the Magellanic rainforests of southern South America, so Chile and Argentina. But now,
So then
let's
when
look
you
at
move
this
down here, you get much more diversity.
Yeah, notice that on both sides of the equator, at about more or less the same latitude, but the same temperature regime, you're getting the Mediterranean scrub. So in the northern hemisphere, this is your marquise of Europe,
Right.
your Matorral of Europe, your Garrigas your Chaparral of California.
Yep.
Southern hemisphere, it is your fynbos of South Africa. It's your coastal heathland or alpine heathland of southern Australia. Savannas straddle the equator. But look at these dry deciduous and semi-evergreen forests. Just have a look at that. Can you see that? Notice these.
Yeah.
They're found over a broad latitude, but
Right.
very narrow precipitation.
Uh-huh.
And what that tells me is that those ones are very they're predominantly influenced by the water regime, and can be overtaken or changed with a little change in water. And now all of these overlap each other. Okay, what I've got here is just the dominant color at any one location, or the dominant biome at any one location. But some of these biomes will merge into the others. There's a lot of overlap.
Right. Now, I have an interesting question about habitats from Emily. She says, do you know the internet game GeoGuessr based on Google Street View? It says habitat experts would be great at it.
No, I love it. I play that game with my kids.
Oh,
yeah.
great.
It's a superb game. Yeah. I remember being dumped into, and I got it smack on the spot just by pure fluke in Cape York Peninsula. Okay, let's have a look at that Mediterranean scrub, because that was a cool one. That's the one. That's Californian. Yeah. So notice wet winters. It's northern hemisphere, so winter is January, December. Wet winters, dry summers, and that'll give you Mediterranean scrubland all around the world. That's the key feature of Mediterranean scrubland. Wet winters, dry summers.
Yeah. Marilyn says she thought she lived in a grassland before, but now it seems as though he lives in a savanna. I guess because there's a few more trees then, Marilyn. Yeah.
Yeah.
And Jacqueline is asking about the controversy about peat moss, using it as a soil amendment. She's heard it's not renewable resource. Well, yeah, I don't know. I think it takes thousands of years for that peat to be created.
No, it's not renewable in the sense that we can make it.
So tell us then what you have planned for the future. You hinted at it a little bit, but what future projects and books are you working on now, Iain?
I've got a couple of books in the pipeline. We're looking at doing all the habitats of North America, so increasing the wetlands,
right? Kind
of fleshing out the lists on some of these, and doing anthropogenic. I really want to work on anthropogenic habitats, like what do rice farms, what are they doing? I know they're actually kind of Sam, Sam, a lot of these people might. Sam Woods, it's kind of fanatical. He's one of my best mates, but like
I love him.
So I asked him to write a couple of pages on rice, wildlife in rice, what he's found, and he came back to me with 26 pages of notes. It's like, okay, all right, well, so there's a lot. Okay, so, and we want to do that for corn. We want to do that for most of the habitats. There's that project. The one I'm most excited about, though, is I'm doing a project on biogeography, biodiversity, and climate change. I'm writing a field guide to it for Princeton. And the concept, the idea of the project is to talk about these concepts that people would normally not want to read, and put it into a digestible form. So as a field guide, if I want to talk about climate change. People, they just turn off. Even and people who see it with bushfires, they see it.
Yeah, it's so depressing.
They just don't want to think about it. It's like, just put it away. But if I can actually say, okay, this is your area, and this is what's happened in the past, and this is what will happen. So, like future Köppen climates, what's going to happen with the vegetation, but putting it in a way that's not too confrontational. I don't want people to see a picture of a polar bear and run, because even I do sometimes. It's like Christ. But if I can do that, we can get a lot of quite complex concepts into people's hands, and they'll be reading it out in bite-sized pieces, and they'll get it'll all fit together. But that's
I'm really looking forward to that. I hope you can still find the time, since we're not really in the pandemic shutdown anymore.
Oh no, I am. I'm in Queensland. I'm still
in Australia.
I'm the happiest, prettiest prison in the world. No, I've still got the time, but also it's with dealing with what politicians are trying to do. It all comes. They've got these policies and these ideas about trying to fix the planet, but if they're not put in a form where people can appreciate them, then it's pointless.
Yeah,
people don't read pages and pages of notes, but if I can put it into an image that they can get almost a visceral reaction to, then I think we're going to accomplish something. So I've got to get that. I think I've got 2.5 years to get that one out. So they're the two books I'm working on. The biogeography is with Keith Barnes, the biogeography, biodiversity, climate change with Keith Barnes, and I've got the North America one with Phil Chone.
Great. And
hopefully I'll be guiding some tours between those. But
right, so tropical birding tours. So, and Australia should eventually open up, right? But a lot of the other areas are opening for
South America is just open, and North America has gone crazy. Yeah, so we've got it's a situation where some of the world's open, other places, Africa's kind of on and off.
Yeah.
So, and I'm worried about that. If we don't get people back into Uganda and Rwanda and fast, it's going to be bad.
Yeah.
And Asia's kind of off limits at the moment.
Yeah.
It's just not. You can't do any tourism in Asia. So it all seems to be near tropics and North America now.
Yeah. Well, I plan to get down there very soon. Well, anyway, anything else you want to say about the book? I know I think it's really unique, but how do you, I could talk about it, but more. How do you think it's most unique compared to other sort of similar guides? Not that there's even a similar guide, but
there is nothing similar to it. There's just nothing similar to it. And I think what I like about it the most are those side boxes.
Yeah.
Those side boxes throughout. I mean, in the book, you've got everything from, I've got soil formation. I've got extinction of people in the Sahara. We just do all of those topics.
Ocean currents and how they affect climate, volcanism.
Plate tectonics.
Yep. Mm-hmm.
It's kind of interesting.
Island biogeography.
I feel as though I've gone full circle. All the stuff that I used to get excited about when I was 20,
Yeah.
21, showing people
that must feel really good.
Yeah, and so
good.
That's pretty much what we're doing.
Marilyn says she's near an alkali sink habitat. Oh, very cool. And Emily is in a deciduous woodland in New England.
Okay. Now, are you in a deciduous woodland, or are you in deciduous mixed woodland? Are there conifers there? That's the question.
She says deciduous hilly woodland, and it's got a bobcat. So what I really love about each of these chapters is it talks about the characteristic mammals and birds you might see there. And also what I really love is where in the world you might see this habitat, what national parks or I think I want to plan a bucket list trip of habitats. Like some people do a birding big year. I want to do a habitats big year.
Oh yeah. I've got 5 that I'm still missing that I need to get to. Out of the 189 I've got.
Oh, wow. I was going to ask you about that. Wow. I've maybe been to, I don't know, 30 or 40 or 50. I don't know. I'm going to have to start checking them off like a birder does with their checklist.
No, you're never going to do that on our bird lists. At the moment, see, people come on tours, and every day you go and you tick off the birds you saw that day, and then you've got a mammal list as well. What I want to do is actually have that at the cover. So every time people go out for the day, they mark the habitats they were in where they saw these things. That's like eBird is one of my favorite programs. eBird's brilliant, yet it's lacking in that people just give a GPS coordinate. So you're getting all these records, but if people just were able to put the habitat they were in, imagine the information would become so much more useful. So much more. Right. But the other thing is, I think people only protect what they know.
Yep.
So by having it, by people seeing it, and hopefully visiting, then there will be more likely to either contribute in some way.
Right. Yeah. Like they say, you only love what you know, and you only know what you're taught. And so you're teaching us to look at the world in a different habitat, through a habitat lens. And I really appreciate that. So yeah, thank you so much. I really appreciate you joining us today, Iain. And I hope this has been helpful for our audience. And again, we gave a link to the Habitats of the World companion website that they made, your team made, and then also the link to the Princeton University Press with the coupon code. And so, okay, well, take care. Have a great day. Your day is just beginning, and my day is just wrapping up. So again, thanks a lot. And I'm sure we'll chat soon about future projects.
All right.
Okay.
See you around.
Take care. Bye-bye.